Good evening and welcome to the Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station. I'm your host, Roman, and we have a terrific show planned for you today. First, the forecast from our IntellectualRadio.com Weather Center today. Nice and partial sunshine here and there. High 83 degrees. Tonight, partly cloudy. High 71 degrees. Tomorrow, clouds and sunshine, high 86 degrees. Tomorrow night, partly cloudy and warm, low of 73 degrees. The rest of the week forecast looks like this. Wednesday, partly sunny and warm, high 89 degrees. Thursday, partly sunny with a chance of a thunderstorm, high 91 degrees. Friday, a couple of thunderstorms, high 91 degrees. And guess what? Your Bud Billiken Parade forecast on Saturday, mostly cloudy and not as warm. And guess what, folks? No rain in the forecast during the parade. High 79 degrees. The Drive at 5 is also part of the Monday Night Mogul with the Spiritual Mentor Show at 4 p.m. Straight No Chaser with Rhea Ray Harris at 6 p.m. Monday Night Mingle with your girl Gina at 7 p.m. Maze Says with Maze Jackson at 8 p.m. The Drive at 5 is also part of the fabulous 5 at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/heart radio station. Today, my guest is President and CEO of Fathers for the Future. Please give a Drive at 5 welcome to J. Michael Carr. Welcome to the Drive, sir.
Thank you, Roman. Thank you.
Please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station your background.
Well, Roman, I am the president and CEO of Fathers for the Future, and as my LinkedIn page showed today, I celebrate 11 years of being the president and founder. I'm very excited about that. We have been operating here in Chicago and also in Las Vegas. We help fathers manage their money to provide for their families. Is just a small thing, but also getting into advocacy in this upcoming year. We served as the treasurer and fiscal agent for the National Hip Hop Political Convention for 2004, 2006, and 2008. We're very committed to young fathers, especially African American fathers.
Please describe to our listening audience what Fathers of the Future provides for the fathers that's out there.
Well, currently, for the last 3 years, we have developed a curriculum that is based on marrying emotional and financial intelligence, which means, I know that sounds like a fancy word, but emotional intelligence is that stopgap for making bad decisions. And what we want to do, because there's so many problems around finances that can be related to mental illness, the stress, what it can do to the body, what it can also do as things don't progress in the way that you would like for them to. We want to help fathers learn how to cope with that stress by dealing with one of the number one issues that affects most families, which are their finances.
Period.
Yeah.
Why resources that is geared towards Black men are not really known in the community? A lot of people have said that there's no resources out here. Resources is the key. And you have an organization. You just named some of the resources. Why is not known to Black men?
I think, first of all, I want to take a step back and say that there are so many nonprofits out there on the ground grinding every day, trying to reach their clients to make them better, whether it's in social services, education, various nonprofit topics. But nonprofits are getting hit really, really hard. And the last 2-3 years have been difficult. And now we have a new governor.
You're defined they're getting hit really hard.
Mm-hmm.
How they're getting hit really hard?
They are financially having to close their doors.
Is it due to the state budget?
A lot of it is due to the state budget, but a lot of it not only is due to the state budget, but it is due to the fact that a lot of changes are going on in the philanthropy world. People don't view charity work the same way that they value social enterprises. So nonprofits working for hundreds of years, you have the bigger nonprofits like Metropolitan Family Services, the Safer Foundation, and they can weather a storm a financial storm that's like been cast down upon all of us here in Illinois. And then you have small nonprofits, which Fathers for the Future, even though we've been around for many years and we've served our clients in South Shore, we're still considered a small nonprofit because we have a budget under $5 million. Then you have the medium level nonprofit organizations, and those are the ones, unfortunately, that are being hit the hardest. They're right there in between, okay, do we close the doors or do we lay everyone off? How do we try to manage this? So when you talk about the resources, it's hard to really work with clients when you don't know when your next paycheck is coming. But there are a lot of resources that are out there in the community. And unfortunately, a lot of brothers just don't take advantage of those resources. It's always funny to me because I serve a population, African American men, between the ages of 16 and 40. And 100% of our clients that have ever come through our door are African American. So I can honestly say that you have your ups and your downs with your clients because they are so based on solving immediate problems that they sometimes can't see the foresight to say, okay, then how do I prevent myself from getting in this situation 5, 6 other times? They don't do the preventative care that's needed to stop the issue. They just resolve the crisis in hand.
Define some of the problems.
Well, since I deal with money and since we focus heavily on finances, payday loan stores. Everybody's used them. You know, I'm guilty. I've used them before in the past. However, a lot of people don't know that they're sometimes being charged 400% on a loan for like $100. However, if they started thinking about savings and putting money aside, even if it's like $10 a week, when the hawk hits and you know it's going to hit and that carburetor goes off and you need $200, wouldn't it be better to actually go into your own savings account and borrow the $200 that you've been putting away for the side for the last 2 years than to go to a payday lender that's going to charge you a 400% loan on the $200 and you're going to have to be paying 3 times as much for that loan if you could have gone to a regular bank? Establishing good credit and being able to work the mainstream avenues of financing is very important. Unfortunately, most blacks are cut out of mainstream marketplace. Either they don't have a job, they have poor credit, they've had problems with other banks. We had, Fathers for the Future had in 2013 a bank day for all of the fathers in the South Shore community that wanted to attend. We were opening up bank accounts for everybody. The only thing you had to do was sit through our 2-hour seminar. We had 40 fathers attend, which is good. You know, it's not too much, it's not too little. We have 40 fathers attend. However, after the bank took all the fathers through check systems, and check systems is a national system that looks at everybody's credit score and whether you owe money to other banks. And they will open an account based on your check system score. Out of those 40 fathers that attended, only 3 of them were able to open up bank accounts because they fit the criteria. And then one of them was wanted for the FBI for fraud. So when you're up against these type of odds, you look for other ways to try to provide for your family. And unfortunately, the black market comes into play, and they have to go to secondary and even third means of trying to support their family.
Speaking of supporting your family, you're speaking of economics, basically. There's a lot of issues that's going on, especially what happened a couple of days ago, which I'll just jump right in to what basically been happening. Currently, in your opinion, we are seeing more and more police shootings of unarmed African American males. This is nothing in comparison to what we're seeing now. Now we have social media.
Mm.
However, seeing the image of police officers slapping high fives, congratulating each other in a celebratory way for killing a young African American male, that image plays with the mental psyche of Black males. Describe the mental illness component of today's Black males. And in my opinion, you see it happening. It's almost like a domino effect. I described it on my show plenty of times. It's like how you blow up a balloon and you only can fill it with so much air and then it will burst.
Mm-hmm.
They're describing the problem. They're saying it's mental illness. They're diagnosing it, but they're not adding the prescription. What is your opinion?
Well, Roman, that's a loaded question. There are several different ways for me to approach that. Uh, Personally, I always like to, especially when I'm asked my opinion, I like to give a little bit of background about myself so you don't feel as if I'm from an ivory tower and I'm passing judgment on anyone. I have been, as I told your other guests that you will speak with later, that I had been diagnosed as being bipolar. My mother was bipolar and schizophrenic. So I understand the need for mental care and ongoing mental maintenance is what they're trying to talk about. And when you talk about mental maintenance and people being offered their medication, uh, it does have an impact on how you perceive what's going on in your life. And what I mean by that is one situation, which is probably a normal situation for that individual that's going through an episode, a manic episode, or whatever you want to call it, it's been intensified by 100 points. So they're not thinking clearly. So they are apt to say, you know what, I'm King Kong, and King Kong, you got nothing on me, and attack a police officer. I'm not saying that that's what's happened. I'm saying that in that state of mind, it can happen. Secondly, my grandmother was the first African American policewoman here in the city of Chicago. So I have an immense amount of respect for law enforcement and how they do their job. With those two things said, I do think that there is a mental illness component because the lack of funding for mental illness facilities has gone down tremendously over the years. From 2009 to 2012, the Illinois budget just for mental illness and mental health cases has been cut by $114 million. This was even prior to last year's Ronner trying to cut the budget, which is still in stalemate. This is happening before that. $114 million was cut. Now, who is the largest provider of mental health services now? You would never believe it, but it is Cook County Jail. So that's something else. That's another component that you're adding to the layer of criminalization, imprisonment, and then mental health issues are being treated as if it's a hospital. More than half in 2012 to 2013, more of half the patients in Cook County Jail, I think it was 54%, were also mentally ill. So you have two simultaneous things going on. You have nobody wants to, and when I mean nobody, the government doesn't want to fund mental illness. They find it, which is very strange considering it's from a conservative, but they find it more advantageous to pay the prisons more money to take care of them than to actually treat the mental illness in a hospital. They've had two major inpatient facilities closed down in the past 10 years. Tinley Park is one of them. They've had 6 community centers that focus on mental health also shut down. So you have people that are saying, okay, I have these problems, but nobody wants to help me. And then you have a culture in the police department that looks at African American men as dangerous. And I'm speaking from a point of view of an MBA that was shoved down on a car, handcuffed with his best friend who has a Juris Doctorate. He was the lawyer for the ACLU. When we did not comply to what the officers were telling us, they handcuffed us, threw us down on the top of the car. My wife Kyra, she wanted to get the keys out of my car because if I was going to be taken in, she wanted to be able to post bail for me, and she needed to drive the car to the police station. So what did they do? They handcuffed her and they threw her face down on top of the car. So you have several factors, and the resolution for this, I do think that there's one step that has happened, which is that the police are trying to be more transparent. And I think that with that transparency,
Well, let me stop you there. When you say transparent, you look at you call that transparent.
yeah,
I mean, you got to be serious there.
yeah,
It's not give and take
no,
transparency there.
no,
You got to look at both sides.
yeah.
Transparency is there's a action for reaction, but the reaction is not even transparent. So
I think it's like
how can you define that?
I think because I'm middle-aged and I'm not as revolutionary as I used to be in my 20s. I understand that change happens slowly, and that's not an excuse, but it's just a reality. I like to consider myself a factivist. You know, I try to use a lot of facts in talking about issues, and I do think that they are trying slowly to be transparent. I think that the perception is they are being transparent. However, the reality still remains that there are a lot of questions. I saw the videos, and I know people that were called to see the video of the police shooting that happened in my area in South Shore last week. I know that the police are trying, and I think Eddie Jones is doing, Eddie Johnson, right? The
Yeah.
police superintendent.
Yeah.
He's doing the best that he can with what he has.
Period.
Yeah, that's all I have to say about it.
Do you think the media, that's also to blame with the transparency, paints a picture of black males as a detriment to society?
Absolutely.
In what way?
I think media ever since television has been around has always portrayed black people less than white people. In fact, I gave a speech a few weeks ago about the 3/5 voting being 3/5 of what a white man is worth. And I do think that the social media and the regular media, they find every way possible to showcase negative images. Mainstream media does everything possible to showcase negative images of African Americans, whether it's men or women. And I've seen both sides. And we actually play a part in that, you know, because I think at some point we can have a bigger pushback on some of the way that we're presented in the media. I think that when Minister Farrakhan last year he called for the justice or else, and it was talking about boycotting Black Friday, and that happened, and it was very successful. We saw that downtown. It was on the Michigan Avenue. There were people out there that were not letting shoppers go in and shop. So it had an economic impact on those stores. the media, unfortunately, they feel like the law. They have an obligation to report, but it's not unbiased anymore. It's set from a position of that lens is focusing on and telling a story that has the rural and suburban areas afraid of urban communities. And so what you see because of that is Donald Trump. It's the rise of Donald Trump because that little Caucasian child that's going to school in Barrington, Illinois, that has never been subjected to having to go to school with any minorities, blacks or Hispanics, only sees what is being portrayed on CLTV News or WGN News, where, oh my God, they're running rampant. They're, there's no restraint in what they're doing. And the only way for there to be any type of civil discord is they have to be repressed. And who is supposed to repress them? Law enforcement. So it's a cycle. You have money that's being fed into perpetuating this image, and then that image is being defended.
A lot of people don't understand what a black man goes through on a daily basis. Even some black women say they understand, however, they don't understand what a black man goes through. Do you think some of the problems we are seeing in black males are contributing to the misinterpretation of black males' understanding of them? It's a misrepresentation of them. And you're talking about the very few that's being publicized. It's kind of like a study that was reported here with the CDC with your speech that says black men are good fathers, but they're only focusing on the 12%. Could you explain that, please?
First of all, it is very difficult to be a black man. Just there is a certain amount of proof. The presupposition is always that you're inferior. And I say that because I remember hearing Clarence Thomas, Judge Thomas, defend getting rid of affirmative action, and that was his his reasoning. And I thought that that was really backwards because the presupposition is we are inferior, and we, no matter what, we have to prove ourselves. And then when you have situations that arise where you have to prove yourself and you fall short of being able to prove yourself, what does that do to you as a man? What does it do to your self-esteem? How do you feel as a father, as a grandfather? When you can't provide for your family, the number one thing, the number one reason that families even exist is to be able to provide. A lot of years and centuries ago, the men went out, they got the food, they brought it back, they cooked it. The women cooked it, took care of the kids. It really hasn't changed all that much. It really hasn't. There's some social economic factors that have been thrown in, but mentally, most men think that they should be the providers of their families. So when you take away the ability to be able to provide for that family, whether it's being unemployed, being underemployed, the mental repercussions of that, you have this acting out. And I have been in this position. I know that you and I have talked and we know each other, but as a cancer survivor, there was an opportunity where had to leave. I was working on a doctorate degree, and I left, and I had to go through a bout with cancer, and I was in a coma for 9 days, and I was paralyzed for 2.5 months, and it took me a year and a half to learn how to walk again. And my wife, she had to take care of our 3 kids at the time. And on a family of 5, nowadays it's impossible to raise a family of 5 on one income. So it got really tight for us. And there was one period of time where Kyra had to go to our local parish to feed our family for 2 weeks. Now, that's tremendous. But all women will do that to take care of their children. They will. I've never met a woman that will not do whatever it takes to take care of her family. But now when you put that same situation in a man, most men run because they don't know how to deal with rejection, and they don't know how to deal with their feelings of feeling inferior. I tell this story all the time when I talk because I really believe, and Fathers for the Future really believes that every father, yeah, of course there will be exceptions, every father wants to be a provider. But what happens when there's a disconnect between wanting to provide and being able to provide? If they're young, most of them leave. They get girlfriends, they get drugs, they have no job, they find alternative ways of making money. They can't deal, so they go to the next girl. And what happens then? Same thing. It's a pattern. It keeps repeating itself. Next thing you know, they got 6 or 7 kids by 5 or 6 different women. So really to talk about the African American male image and, when did this start and how did the media buy into all of this, and we buy into it just ourselves, that you don't have to feel like you're inferior. You need to be able to pull yourself together and have intelligence to work through those issues.
How can you do that if the government say you need to be self-reliant on us, not independent, rely on us? That was the definition during the 60s. We had our own. You knew that, but they took it away. They always take things away from us. So how can a black man survive if they don't want to hire him because you're a felon? How that can happen if you need to feed your children. And that's why you have the drugs that plays into the mental illness. The drugs in our society is plaguing our community, ripping families apart. Describe that to us, because when you say it's out there, it's hard to, in reality, it's the opportunities is not there. When you're saying, brother, step up, be the lion, how can they be a lion if the resources like a white family or a Hispanic family now, there's no self-reliance there. There's no help me up or pick me up. I can't ask you, hey brother, can I borrow $20? I can't do that.
Why can't you?
Why? Because there's a sense of pride. See, your plight is different from my plight. So I'm not going to broadcast my plight. It's your decision to broadcast yours.
Yeah.
But that's why they're turning to selling drugs. Your thoughts?
Well, the war on drugs is a lot bigger than I think you can sum up in a few short comments. Drugs has been around for centuries, and trying drugs and alcohol, and they use them as coping mechanisms, because now if you're not on Paxil, then you're like smoking weed. If you're not on Seroquel, which is a drug for schizophrenia, then you've probably started trying heroin, or one drug leads to another, which I actually found interesting. Kyra was sharing with me an article the other day that marijuana is not the gateway drug, it's alcohol. And to answer your question, where do fathers or black men go, specifically black men, go when all these doors are being closed? First of all, they need to go within themselves. And let me finish that thought. Because I've worked with enough men that they only want to improve themselves when it's convenient. They don't have a long-term commitment to improvement, to self-betterment, self-improvement. And yes, the government is making it nearly impossible, especially around mental health, and getting jobs is difficult, and getting social services now is like next to impossible, where it was very easy even 4 or 5 years ago. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of our interview, that nonprofits are not necessarily the right place to go anymore. And unfortunately, it is looking hopeless. And I'm a pessimist personally, but I'm trying to become an optimist. And I have to say that where can they go is they have to find it within themselves to endure. That's the first step. Because I understand that you have all of these factors that are working against you. But brother, we all have our own factors working against us. And if you really truly find it that you have to succeed, you have to find a way, because there is no alternative. The alternative is you being dead. If you stay addicted to drugs, if you're part of the narcotics game and you're selling drugs or whatever variations, and because right now you have a three-sided war. You have that gang that's standing in front of you that wants a piece of the action. Then you have the cops standing on the other side of them who want to bust your head, or even worse. And then you have the community, which is really kind of tired and fed up. You really have nowhere to go. You need to get it together.
On that note, I have to cut it short. Thank you so much for joining us. How they
Thank you,
can
Roman.
get a hold of you?
Oh, if you're interested in Fathers for the Future, you can visit our website, which is www.fathersforthefuture.org, or you can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the drive. Thank you so much. When we come back on the Drive at 5 on the intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station, my guest is the owner and founder of Deep Production Studios, Lawrence Lee Wallace, and April will be when we come back. Thanks. And we're back on the Drive at 5 on intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station. His films will be featured in the Gene Siskel Film Center Black Film Festival that is this week. Please give a Drive at 5 welcome to Lawrence Wallace. Welcome to the Drive, sir.
Hey.
You're no stranger to intellectualradio.com.
No, not at all. I've been here a few times, actually. I love it here.
Yeah, and next to you is April
Warren.
Warren. So please give the Drive at 5 and intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station your background, starting with you, Lawrence.
Well, I am the creator of D Production Studios. D Production Studios is a film production company, and we make movies, music videos, commercials, anything that has to do with visual media. Currently, I am on the council for the Black Harvest Film Festival at the Gene Siskel Film Center. And I actually have two films in this year's Black Harvest Film Festival. One is called This Is Not Chirac, which is basically kind of like the anti-Spike Lee Chirac. And the second film is based on this young lady's book called Sunshine Day. And it's a novel that she wrote. And she's also the writer and executive producer of the film. She adapted it to a screenplay and hired me to direct. It's called Sunshine Day, and it's about mental illness and domestic abuse.
Your background?
Okay, well, I'm April Warren. Like Lawrence Lee Wallace said, I am the writer and executive producer of the movie Sunshine Day. It is a film that brings awareness to mental illness, suicide, and domestic violence. And my purpose of writing Sunshine Day was to pretty much bring more awareness to these issues.
Now, please describe to intellectualradio.com/iHeart radio station your film that will be featured at the Gene Siskel Theater.
So Sunshine Day is going to be on the 26th and the 30th.
Of this month?
Yes, of this month. And Sunshine Day is a period piece. And part of it is in black and white because part of it is set in the 70s and the other half is set in the 80s. So it's a very beautifully crafted, dramatic film about a young girl named Sunshine. And it's very much a coming of age story, with her as she grows up from a child into a young woman, and her family and her friends all around her are trying to deal with the patriarch of the family suffering from severe mental illness.
Now, April, what made you come up with this concept? What inspired you?
Well, actually, Sunshine Day is a true story based on my parents. Sunshine, the character Sunshine is based on my mother character, and the character Josh Jr. is based on my father. He suffered from mental illness. And pretty much I started just jotting down my thoughts as a form of therapy from what I saw. I don't want to give too much of the film away because it's dramatic, but I did start writing my story as pretty much at first a form of therapy. It was therapeutic. It helped me get through what I saw as a child with my dad and what transpired because of him suffering from mental illness. And I realized that, hey, writing this down and it pretty much helped me, and I wanted to help my family out as well. And that was when I reached out to Lawrence Lee Wallace in regards to making the film Sunshine Day. And here we are.
You encourage people to watch this film, especially the Black community. In one of the films that describes the mental illness, Sunshine Day, the Black community has a non-issue. It's kind of like they turn their back when the issue is mental illness. Now that person does not have mental illness, they just crazy. But in this film, you're saying that the Black community needs to get serious about this.
Yes.
In what way?
They need to recognize it more. They need to understand that mental illness is not being crazy. And I think that's the misconception. People feel like, oh, well, you're mentally ill, you're crazy. Mental illness needs to be treated just like cancer because it is an illness that could eventually kill you. And my dad lost his life due to mental illness. And so my goal is to spread the word, share my story with the world, and hopefully I can save someone who's going through the same thing. Mental illness is not crazy, it's just that you're sick. And a lot of people in the African American community don't know that. They feel like it's crazy. It's a thin line, but you're definitely not crazy. You're sick and you can be helped. There is treatment out there. Like the young man saying before us, who was doing the last segment, there's a lot of mental illness facilities that has been closed. And hopefully Sunshine Day will let our elected officials see that, hey, mental illness is real and this is what can happen and we need to start being more serious about mental illness.
So, is this a family film that a family can see the film, or is it more for the adults to see it? Because if you're describing mental illness, you need to open people up, their horizons up, correct?
Right, yeah.
So is it more towards the adults to pay attention to this issue if they see the film?
Well, it's kind of more for adults to pay. I mean, it's for young people too.
Yeah, I think it's for everyone.
Yeah.
The film does have a lot of violence because once again, this is a true story. So
Right.
in the film, it shows all what my father went through, what my mother went through. There is, domestic violence and things
Right.
like that. So I
It's
feel like
real.
it's the parents' discretion. We did have a movie premiere on Mother's Day. There were some children there. Some parents didn't feel comfortable bringing their children. So it's pretty much the parents' discretion as to whether or not they feel like their child is ready to see the film. I will advise, I would say yes, because it's real.
But it's a discussion that needs to be had.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, it's right. It's good to have your kids there to see the film so that you can have a conversation with them afterwards, because that's the problem. The conversation isn't being had. So this is a good opportunity to expose your children to something that they may be experiencing, or maybe someone in their family may be experiencing. And so now you have a better handle on explaining to them what it is and what's going on, and giving them a better understanding of what it is, and actually having that conversation, because it's not being had, frankly.
When you talk about Black films, you talk about the image it portrays in the mainstream media. Not Chirac is one of those pictures, which is the answer to Spike Lee's Chirac that portrays African Americans to, some people call it sex addicts.
Yeah.
I'm just going what I know. And by withholding sex is the answer to help curb the violence in Chicago. What is the comparison between Not Chirac and Chirac?
Well, this is not Chirac. It's basically, it's just a realistic look at what's going on in the streets of Chicago. What Spike Lee's Chirac was, I want to say, honestly, in my opinion, it was a parody of what's going on in Chicago. It was over sexualized. He didn't take it seriously at all, in my opinion. And he honestly, he dropped the ball with it. He had the opportunity to tell a real and honest story, and give people the opportunity to have a real and honest conversation about what's going on here with young men and women in the city. But he chose to go a a funny route with it, and it's not funny here. It's not a joke. So this is not Chirac is basically the answer to that. We're basically giving the people of Chicago what they deserve. We're giving them a true look at what's going on in the streets of Chicago, and we're giving them real possible solutions behind it also.
The recent violence in Chicago has a story of its own. However, there is a story behind a story.
That's right.
In regards to the individuals that is played in not Chirac, correct?
Right.
Why their stories is so important to spin in a positive direction. However, seeing this every single day is the Black reality. As a film director, how can you compare, like you said before, he misrepresentation. You took a challenge on that to make it, this is our reality.
Right.
I was raised here.
Mm-hmm.
What led you to tell that story and make it a reality?
This was actually something to work even before Spike Lee's Chirac came along, because I think everyone here in Chicago has been touched by street violence in one way or another. I've lost 3 family members to it. One literally just recently, like last week. So I'm hard pressed to find anyone in my circle that has not lost someone to some form of gun or gang violence here. So it's real. It's real for us. It's a reality for us, and it's not as simple as sex. How Spike Lee was presenting it. Spike Lee was presenting it as, just keep your legs closed, ladies, and keep your panties on, and that will fix everything. But no, it's not as simple as that. It's not as simple as that. It's it's a problem with systemic racism. It's a problem with the lack of good education. Of housing is also an issue. Politics, play a big role in what's going on in the streets of Chicago. So all of these things are actually touched on in this series. And another thing, This Is Not Chirac is actually a television pilot for a much longer series. There are like other episodes behind this. It's being promoted as a film for the film festival, but this is actually a television pilot that's being marketed to networks.
April, the portrayal of Black women today on films. What is your opinion? They are called, Black males are described as thugs. Black women are described as an H or B. And as a person who writes and produces, are you careful of the image that you portray in the Black community in telling their story?
Definitely, yes, I am. Like you said, the Black community, our men are portrayed as thugs, our women are portrayed as the B word and the H word. And as a film producer and a writer, I feel like I have the path to change things, change the way the world view us as a people. And I'm cautious as to how I promote myself and my film.
What about you?
How women are presented?
I can tell you was doing something else. The portrayal of African Americans.
Well, for a long time, our portrayal has been limited. It's been, as she said, of thugs, of criminals, of just recently, just over the past, I want to say like 10, 20 years, we've been getting better roles, but it still isn't enough, and that's really why we need to start telling our own stories. You know, we more of us need to be behind the scenes. People of color need to be in the writer's room, executive producing, you know, our own films and television shows and distributing them ourselves to each other, you know, because they're the stories that we know ourselves the best. So we're gonna, you know, put out the best for us.
And if somebody wants to get a hold of you guys, how they get a hold of you?
Well, we have a Facebook page, Sunshine Day. If you go on Facebook, you can reach us, Sunshine Day the Movie, as well as on Twitter, same thing, Sunshine Day the Movie.
You can get in contact with me at www.deepproductionstudios.com.
Now, this is Black owned and operated, correct?
Yes.
And it's very hard. Just a couple of seconds. What led you to do this on your own?
Like I said, I just want to see a good representation of myself on television. You know, that'd be the same with April. She wanted to tell her story, and who better to tell her story than her? You know, and I have ideas to tell, so who better to tell them than me?
And you know, Earl Winfrey wants you to tell his story as well. So
I'm waiting on him. I told him whenever he's ready.
Well, thanks to Earl Winfrey, Rhea Ray, and she is up next with Straight No Chasers. You guys have a great week. Thank you guys for the drive. All right.
Thanks for having us.